one of those cameras. But welcome to the annual ANZ post-budget breakfast. Thank you for taking the time out to come to one of our favourite business customers, Pickpock. This morning's run sheet's pretty simple. Please help yourself to, and continue to help yourself to breakfast. Enjoy it as we have our discussions. We're much more informal than a hotel ballroom this year. I'm going to be shortly introducing Sharon Zöllner, our Chief Economist, and then Finance Minister Nicola Willis, and they'll share their thoughts on yesterday's budget. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, but we're going to aim to get everyone away by about 8:30. Simple housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, please follow the Pickpock staff out of the door to your right and walk down the stairwell to the ground floor and the assembly points outside the library on Victoria Street. The women's restrooms are on your right through the kitchen door, and the men's are on your left through the entrance you used. Pickpock staff will be there because you need swipe access to get into the bathroom. They're all wearing Pickpock t-shirts and or hoodies. So that's a note to self, wear hoodie to work. This is a creative studio, so please stay within the designated guest areas and be mindful of the equipment around. Thank you. Before I ask Sharon to share her views, I do want to extend a big thank you to Pickpock founders Mario Winans and Tyrone Macaulay for hosting us this morning. For those new to the video game developer and publisher world, Pickpock is New Zealand's largest, having been founded in 1997 and now employing more than 200 staff worldwide. From a lounge in Lower Hutt to nearly 500 million downloads worldwide, Mario and Tyrone have created something truly incredible, so we're very honoured to be here for breakfast. The gaming world has, of course, changed a lot since I played Pac-Man and Frogger in the 80s. Pickpock has been critically and commercially successful titles across mobile, PC and console. The Into the Dead series, a post-apocalyptic zombie survival series, which sounds a lot like modern banking to me. And BAFTA, who knew? BAFTA nominated Super Monsters Ate My Condo, which I'm told isn't about leaky buildings. So anyway, enough of my dad jokes. Welcome to Sharon, share her thoughts.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief and high level because I know I'm very much the warm-up act. The economy is in a pretty tight spot at the moment. We're not alone in this. Much of the globe finds itself in a pretty similar situation, grappling with the same kinds of issues. We've seen a sharp fall in business and consumer confidence, suggesting less employment and investment, which makes sense. Those are risky things to do, and the world feels like a scarier place. On the consumer side, obviously, people are feeling poorer, and they are poorer. If they have to spend more for a necessity, that means they have less to spend on everything else. Combine that with lower confidence and uncertainty about how the economy might be going, and you have a recipe for a consumer slowdown as well. So we're not forecasting a recession. I don't think anyone is, although obviously uncertainty is very high. But it is very frustrating at best, I think, for people feeling they've had the rug pulled out from them just when things were actually starting to feel better. So that is the world we are in, and it does put policymakers in a tough spot too. And of course, we've heard from both monetary policy and fiscal policy this week. And in a way, they face similar trade-offs. Do they want to make things a little bit better now, but at what cost down the line? So in terms of the Reserve Bank, their focus is very much on the medium term. Highly counterintuitive that you would want to make mortgage holders pay more interest at the moment when they've got so many other costs that are going up that they can't do anything about. But the idea there is that if you don't do what's needed today, you'll end up causing a bigger problem down the track and more pain than is necessary. Fiscal policy, kind of similar trade-offs. Like monetary policy, it can't just magic up wealth or income. In terms of the aggregate level of fiscal spending, all you're really doing is shifting spending through time. Of course, future taxpayers don't vote, and so that there is a natural bias in policy making. And there is that saying that democracy is the absolute worst form of governance, apart from all of the others, because it does encourage a degree of short-term thinking. And so that is a challenge for fiscal policy as well, particularly with oil shocks that are, of course, the worst of both worlds in terms of being negative for growth, but also inflationary. There is just some discretion, obviously, but obviously constraints too, and the inflation targeting regime itself is a constraint on fiscal policy, actually, because if fiscal policy decided to try to go all out to support growth now, that would be inflationary, and the Reserve Bank would counter it and effectively have to undo it down the track. And that is, of course, what we saw during the COVID period. Very different shock there insofar as at that time the economy was very, very strong because of so much stimulus. It doesn't feel strong at the moment, but the inflation is, of course, the common theme across those two events. So basically that does constrain fiscal policy's effective options. Monetary policy, of course, is constrained by a very clear target. And so if they decided to give the economy a chance now, then they would have to fix any issues that came up down the track. The current level of government debt is also a constraint. There's a lot of debate about what the appropriate level for debt is. Some suggest that it doesn't matter, but of course it's our debt. It's not the government's debt. It's debt that belongs to all of us and those who aren't even born yet as well. So debt does matter, unfortunately, because it's really a question of, do you want to use up your choices now or preserve some choices for down the track? Unfortunately, bad things do happen, whether they're natural disasters or political disasters like the Middle East issue at the moment, or whatever it might be, and we do need to keep some powder dry to deal with those down the track, or risk being in a situation where we really can't help the most vulnerable in a way that you would think is the right thing to do. So in that context, we do need to get out of structural deficit because otherwise we're just headed for that situation. This budget is not actually an austere one. It's not a generous one either. It's a pragmatic kind of compromise between the here and now and the future, I would say. It's not at all clear that the forecast surplus will happen. The forecasts for the economy beyond even 3 months, I would say, are uncertain, but certainly 4 or 5 years out, anything could happen, obviously. The forecast for how much tax revenue the economy is going to bring in look a bit on the sunny side to us. So there are definitely risks around the outlook in that regard, and New Zealand will have to address any challenges that emerge as we go along. But as they say, politics is the art of the possible, and it's election year, so that's a segue to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon, and let's see how the Minister responds to that critique and tell us a little bit more about the budget. So welcome to the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Nicola Willis.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for standing to listen to me speak. And I think it's great that we're doing that because we are standing in a business that we should all be very proud of. PICPOC have been growing extremely fast, creating very well-paying jobs for the people who work here. They're part of a broader gaming industry that is going great guns. New Zealand seems to have some talents that are quite specific. Not only are we good at creating dairy products, we are very good at sending rockets into space and creating really good games that people love playing online. So here's to you, PICPOC. It's fantastic to be here. And thank you to the ANZ for hosting me and for hosting you and making this function possible this morning. Because it is great to be here with so many business leaders, investors, innovators and other employers. You are people who are helping shape New Zealand's economic future every day. I want to have my own fangirl moment and acknowledge Sharon Zöllner. She's right. It's a very difficult time for anyone to be forecasting, and that includes the New Zealand Treasury, because what forecasters are being asked to do is estimate exactly how the conflict in the Middle East will unwind. And ultimately, that is a debate between the Ayatollahs and Donald Trump. And so therefore it is quite hard to predict exactly what will happen, and forecasters are having to take that into account as they put numbers together. So as I say, Sharon's analysis is always thoughtful, grounded, respected across the business community, and so I appreciate hearing her views. So this morning I want to build on what Sharon has already said, what we've said yesterday, and talk about what sits underneath Budget 2026. And of course there are the individual announcements, there are the headline numbers, but I'd like the opportunity to reflect on the broader direction they point to and the kind of economy and country our government is working to build. The budget is about balancing spreadsheets. That really does matter, but it is about more than that. It is about positioning New Zealand to succeed in a world that I think we can all acknowledge has become more uncertain, more competitive, and less forgiving of poor economic management. I think people in this room probably understand that context instinctively, and New Zealanders have experienced that unfolding over these last several years. That we have lived through an extraordinary economic period. We came through a pandemic, then a global inflation shock that was particularly acute here at home, then sharp rises in interest rates, and while the economy has been beginning to recover, it is simply the case that many households and businesses are undoubtedly still feeling the pressure of higher living costs and ongoing global uncertainty, and our government is very aware of that. At the same time, we are navigating growing geopolitical instability and those fuel price pressures linked to the conflict in the Middle East. So for a small trading nation at the bottom of the Pacific, clearly global shocks matter, and we cannot control these events. What we can do, and what I think a responsible government must do, is ensure that New Zealand is better placed to respond to them when they occur in future. And that is fundamentally what's been in our minds as we've put this budget together. How can we protect and secure New Zealanders when we know that the world will continue to be uncertain? How do we strengthen New Zealand's resilience and secure our future in a more uncertain world? Because resilience matters. Countries with weak public finances are more vulnerable when shocks hit. If we don't invest now in infrastructure and allow it to become outdated, that will hold back growth. And if we don't adapt, we risk falling behind. So Budget 2026 has been very much focused on how do we build that stronger foundation while growing the economy, investing in the services and infrastructure that New Zealand needs, and restoring discipline to the government's books. So I think the budget shows that we're a government that can walk and chew gum at the same time, because we are achieving both of those things. The thing that I want New Zealanders to know is, yes, this is a setback, the Middle East crisis and the fuel costs that people are experiencing. But in Treasury's independent and professional judgment, they see us bouncing back from this time of elevated prices, and they see our economy strengthening in its growth over the next few years, with that accelerating. And that growth matters for every Kiwi family, because with it comes 220,000 more jobs that Treasury is forecasting will be created in the coming years. That matters. They are also forecasting that wages will grow faster than inflation, and that's what's going to help people get ahead and feel like they can get on top of the cost of living. And that economic growth lifting from 1.2% this year to 3.2% by 2028, that would be a very healthy clip of growth. And so that is the backdrop against which the budget sits. But then there are our own spending decisions. And I always find it amusing when people start talking about Nicola Willis spending on this or spending on that, because you know what? It's not my money. It's your money. And I think that we owe it to you to be very careful about how we use it, and to be conscious that we are taking that money in tax from working people, many of whom are up against it. So we have to be able to look New Zealanders in the eye and say, when we're investing the dollars we tax you for, we are ensuring that it's going into high impact places and that we're getting value for you. And that is the way we've approached spending decisions in this year's budget. Of course, the money is tight. Last year the government set an operating allowance of $2.4 billion, much smaller than Grant Robertson traditionally had. And even so, Budget 2026 comes in below that with a net operating package of $2.1 billion. And that restraint, we think, matters because that's what allows us to get that debt mountain down. It's what will allow us to get the books back in balance. And again, that matters to all of us. The interest bill on our debt this year is $9 billion. I recognise that it's hard to understand what that number means. Well, here's another way of thinking about it. That is 4 times the value of the entire operating package of my budget. That is almost enough to pay for the entire compulsory education sector for a year. And so the reality is that with debt servicing that high, if we let debt keep spiralling, more and more of our share of budgets will be taken up by interest. And every dollar we are spending on that is a dollar we're not investing in hospitals, not investing in new roads, not investing in educating our kids. Our view is you've got to get that debt mountain down. That starts with getting the books back in balance. So when we look at the other indicators, business investment has been improving, exports have been strengthening, and despite the global volatility, Treasury is now forecasting that we will return to surplus in our target year of 28-29. And it is, I think, an achievement that is happening a year earlier than previously forecast. Sharon's right, as I say. There is always challenges in the forecasting, but pleasingly, not only are we coming forward, but Treasury, even in their downside scenarios, still forecast that we can get back to surplus. And it would be the first operating surplus in around a decade. So it's been a long time between drinks. And as I say, those deficits do not come for free. Every year that we are continuing to spend more than we earn, that debt is growing. And interest is now one of our biggest annual expenditures. So bending that debt curve down is one of the core goals our government has set. To give you again some context, core Crown net debt rose from below 20% of GDP before the pandemic to above 40% now, so it's roughly doubled as a share of the economy. And Treasury now forecasts debt peaking at 46.1% of GDP in the 27-28 year before declining to 44.4% by the end of the forecast period. And that's a real improvement from where we were even a few months ago. And it is reflected in the government's borrowing program. I think the ANZ was probably among those who was forecasting that we'd be announcing a bigger government borrowing program yesterday. In fact, we did the opposite. The New Zealand Debt Management has lowered its forecast issuance of government bonds by $6 billion over the next 4 years. And that's the first time that we've lowered the government borrowing program since 2021. So that is a positive step in the right direction. Again, it reflects our determination to restore fiscal headroom before the next major shock arrives. And internationally, that sends an important signal too, because it tells investors, it tells ratings agencies, it tells businesses that New Zealand is serious about responsible economic management. And in a world where capital is mobile and confidence matters, credibility on that really counts. But we recognise that discipline alone isn't the story. Our focus is very much on growing the economy and making sure that it is more productive. And our view is that long-term prosperity requires investment in the foundations of that growth. So alongside spending restraint, Budget 2026 does make major and targeted investments in the infrastructure, services and reforms that New Zealand will rely on in future. So in total, the budget includes $7 billion in new capital investment. That includes major investments in regional hospitals, new classrooms and school redevelopments, upgrading the rail network, transport resilience projects in particular, in those communities where their road gets damaged, it gets closed, people can't get in and out of that community, and we just keep on having to pay to fix it afterwards. Well, better to fix it up before it happens. And so a number of resilience projects of that sort, defence capability and energy security infrastructure. So those investments are very much designed to strengthen resilience, support growth, improve frontline service delivery and back jobs across New Zealand. In the context of that $7 billion, the Infrastructure Commission have a rule of thumb. They estimate that every $1 billion we invest in infrastructure supports around 4,500 jobs. So we know that those projects will be job rich. I actually also think infrastructure is part of the business story, because if businesses cannot grow efficiently if roads keep closing after storms, exporters can't compete globally if infrastructure costs continue rising, and families can't thrive if health and education and housing systems are under pressure. So this matters to all of us. And a major focus of the budget, as I said, those transport resilience projects, but also responding appropriately to the fuel crisis that is still with us. We do provide in the budget temporary, targeted and time-limited support to help households and sectors most affected by fuel price pressures, if required, and while we're keeping that broader fiscal repair program on track. We recognise that if the fuel prices are to stay higher for longer, that further steps may be necessary, so we have created a $450 million reserve to allow us to respond appropriately. Another major focus is removing the barriers that have held back growth and affordability for too long. You will have heard me say in recent days that I don't think sugar hits are what fix affordability in this country. We've seen the very clear evidence of that when governments just do short-term spending initiatives, they can actually drive up inflation. But they also don't get at the underlying challenges which lead to affordability problems. Our view is that you've got to look at the big issues. You've got to look at housing. You've got to look at electricity. You've got to look at the rates that councils are charging. And fixing those things requires a longer-term policy program. But that being a longer-term policy program doesn't mean that you don't make progress pretty quickly. I think of what we've achieved in housing so far, where across many metrics we are seeing housing become more affordable, with more first home buyers in the market, rents having stabilised, and Treasury forecasting a more moderate rate of house price growth into the future. Our Going for Housing Growth program is about reforming planning laws, improving infrastructure funding tools and changing incentives so that councils are rewarded for enabling growth rather than blocking it. We recognise that if housing becomes too expensive, workers will not be able to move to opportunity, business costs will rise and too much investment gets diverted away from other productive parts of the economy. And so you saw us in yesterday's budget create a fund to incentivise councils to keep consenting more homes, and that's a positive support for our housing reforms. We're also continuing reforms to build a more modern, higher performing public sector that uses technology better, reduces duplication and directs more resources to frontline services rather than the back office. And really importantly, it's absolutely not about reducing services, it is about improving performance and ensuring that we continue to get value from every dollar the government spends. Ultimately, the budget is about ensuring New Zealand is more competitive, more resilient, more productive and more confident about its future. Sustainable growth is built on certainty, and certainty that inflation will stay under control, that debt will remain manageable, and governments that are willing to make disciplined decisions even when they are difficult. We are investing in the things that really matter to Kiwis. People say to me, but what's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you is we're making sure that we're investing significantly in the public health system that we and our fellow New Zealanders rely on. We're investing significantly in the education system that is essential to ensuring equality of opportunity for kids growing up in this country. We're investing significantly in public infrastructure and rebuilding the capability of our Defence Force and the law and order system that keeps our communities safe. These investments matter to every Kiwi. But at the same time, we are making some tough decisions early rather than leaving bigger problems for later. We're building a country where success can be measured not just by GDP figures, but for me, it is about whether young New Zealanders can build a good life here, whether they can find opportunity, build businesses, raise families, and believe their future is brighter here than anywhere else in the world. And that is the direction that New Zealand is working towards. There's obviously still more work to do, and the world remains uncertain, but I think our budget shows that we can make progress, that we are moving in the right direction. So thank you very much, and I am looking forward to the discussion.
I'm going to assume you can hear me well enough, because all I'm doing is asking for questions. Thank you, Minister, for those candid remarks, and I hope there are some questions in the room for either the Minister or Sharon. There she is. Joe.
Marina, Minister, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and thank you for the investment in the health system. Not just the front line, but the infrastructure as well, which will be really important for our ageing population who have made New Zealand what it is. I work for Enliven, no frills, no sugar hit, charitable aged care provider, and I've recently been forced to close one of my homes. I wonder if you would care to comment on the apparent lack of investment into a sector that is seeing a growing demand and a particular mismatch between the cost of care and the available funding?
Well, first of all, let me acknowledge that aged care provision is a very important part of the service delivery available for New Zealanders, and we do recognise that it's going to be of growing importance as our population ages. And we have a view that actually making sure that there are aged care options that prevent New Zealanders from having to be in a hospital setting is not only good for them and their families, but makes good financial sense as well for the government. So what you're aware of, I'm sure, is that we have put together a group of experts across the industry to provide us actionable insights and recommendations about what reforms are required for the aged care sector, because we recognise it's an area we're getting the settings right in the medium term, frankly, in a way that will endure over successive governments matters, and there has not been a proper refresh of that system in some time. In terms of the funding for the sector, as you know, we fund Health New Zealand, and then Health New Zealand go out and contract different providers. The budget provides a significant uplift in funding for Health New Zealand across primary care and secondary care, and does allow them the opportunity to meet the extra costs that are coming from volume pressures and cost pressures. It is another significant uplift in funding for Health New Zealand. So it's not for me to carry out the negotiation between Enliven and Health NZ. I won't nail that one today. But they are in a position where we've recognised the growing costs that they face. And I would also just like to express that I'm very sorry to hear that you've had to close one of your centres. I recognise every business is in different circumstances and there will be different factors that have gone into that. But absolutely it's the case we want to see more aged care in future. Thank you. I think those television cameras make people a little nervous. But what I would tell you is that you're off the camera because you're behind it. I'm the one who's being filmed at this point. Yeah.
What was the base case for the Iran, the Middle East, in the budget?
So the base case so the way that Treasury have done it is they've looked at the oil futures markets. They've basically said, well, what's the oil price doing into the future according to those markets, and use that as their base case. And that base case has oil prices coming down this year and then levelling out next year. There's slightly different views about whether it levels out higher than pre-conflict, and if so, how much. So Treasury's base case is that we will see the fuel crisis abate this year, that prices will come back down to a more normal, that we will, unfortunately, as a result of what's already happened and where the oil price has been, see inflation reach a high of 4%, see unemployment go a little bit higher. We're in the worst bit of it now in Treasury's estimation, and then we will recover from here. So, look, that base case, it's very real for people. They've gone just as we were coming into that period in January and February. Remember those days? And we were seeing the economy really strengthening across the board. The indicators were coming in far stronger than anything Treasury had dared to forecast or predict. And then we obviously were hit by the Middle East events. And so it has delayed the recovery, it has not derailed it. And so it is positive that we keep seeing growth this year in the base case, and as I say, that growth accelerates into the out years. Go Leighton, he's brave.
Morning, Minister.
Good morning.
I was just wondering how you're thinking about superannuation and how Treasury are thinking for that as well.
Thank you, Leighton. Do you know, one of the things I've noticed is the people who ask me about superannuation tend to be our age or younger. And it's because I think people our age and younger have looked at superannuation and gone, well, I want to make sure that I get superannuation too. And it needs to be affordable into the future. And so we need to have settings that are fair. And we also recognise that if you want to have superannuation into the future, it's not really fair if the only way that's achieved is by vastly increasing taxes on working people in the future. So my view is that if you look at superannuation now, the costs of it are rising very sharply, taking up a much bigger share of every dollar of tax that people spend. And it would be wiser for politicians to have a discussion now about gradual small changes that we could make to make that more affordable and sustainable into the future than to pretend it's never, ever going to have to change. I just don't think that's a realistic position. So as a national party, we will go into the election campaign with a policy on New Zealand superannuation with the goal of keeping it universal, affordable, sustainable. We've already announced part of our approach to savings. I know that Sharesies shares me and the excitement that we have committed to doubling default contributions to KiwiSaver over time. One of the things I was really pleased to do in last year's budget was start increasing those default contributions. So they've gone up from 3 to 3.5, and they will go up to 4% another year from now. One of the experiments that we ran there when we did that as a government was we said, let's give people the opportunity, given the cost of living has been high, that if they wish to stick with the 3% contribution rate and not jump up to 3.5, they can opt out and do that. IRD tell me, look, the numbers aren't final yet, but IRD tell me that very few New Zealanders have opted to go down to that lower level of contribution. They're actually taking that 3.5 and they're saying, yep, that's what's good for me, my future, my retirement. And I think what we're seeing New Zealanders see is understand the value of putting that nest egg away with a small contribution from their wage today. It compounds over time. So I think KiwiSaver has a massive role in New Zealand's future, not only for giving people better retirements, actually giving them more of a stake in investment in this economy. And I want to see that capital pool deepening so that we have KiwiSaver funds investing in Kiwi businesses and in this economy, and there will be much more of that as that savings pool grows. And of course, some people will choose to invest it via a whole bunch of different ways. So thank you for the question.
Minister, as a local Wellington hospitality business owner, there is some fairly short-term thinking in our industry because obviously Wellington is struggling, our rate base is getting smaller, job cuts in the sector, or in government sector, means that there's more uncertainty, and uncertainty is not good in our industry. So 2 questions. Are there any thoughts in terms of short-term saying, what can we do for Wellington? And secondly, with the declining base of ratepayers in Wellington, is there alternative ways of funding councils so they can't keep on going to a declining pool of ratepayers who no longer have money to afford the rates?
Yeah, well, look, obviously I'm a Wellingtonian. I care a lot about this city. And actually, Andrew Little, the Mayor, and I had an exchange recently where we both agreed that it's in Wellington's best interests that we promote the fact that we're not just about government. We are about government, and that's an important part of what happens in the city. But we're also about pickpock. We're also about Volpara. We're also about our film industry. We are about our software sector. We're about the tech companies that are based here and that have started here. You know, this is the place where Xero started, where Henry started, where Sharesies started. And so we are a city that is not just about a public sector, it's about a private sector too. And we need to promote that, and we need to see it growing, and we need to see it thriving. At the same time, yes, we have signalled that over the next few years, we do want to get the public service getting more value for money. I think we need to put in context the numbers because, in fact, what we see every month is that thousands of new jobs are created in the New Zealand economy, and at the same time, thousands stop. That is the way that modern labour markets work. In our budget forecast, 220,000 jobs being created over the next few years. Many of them will be in Wellington, and many of them will continue to be there to support people. And in Wellington's case, we will continue to have a very significant number of people employed in the public service, and they do great work. I think in your question what you're getting at is the fact that Wellingtonians have also been slapped with particularly large rate increases. And that is true, and that has a real impact, I think, on our business community who are paying very high rates relative to other parts of the country. Now, I don't stand for local government, other people do, but my view has been very candid that Wellington needs to get its spending under control because it is totally unsustainable to have rate rises at the level they have been. It's very bad for this city. And that's one of the reasons, actually, why our government is introducing legislation to put caps on rates, the rate that they can increase, because we think it's very damaging to economies when they keep going up at the pace they have. Now, it is the case for Wellington, yes. we're going to have to play catch-up on investment in our water infrastructure. Our local water done well reforms are all about saying we never want to be in a situation again where as a country things get as bad as they have on the water investment. So we're going to have these independently regulated entities now. And actually in the budget we put funding in so that the Commerce Commission can take that role and ensure that they're being monitored to make sure they're doing the investment and that they're levying for it fairly. So we're thinking a lot about the durability of council funding. Of course, as I say, we've also done the Housing Flexible Fund. We do think that making sure local government is working well and getting impact for the ratepayer dollar is also part of what government needs to think about.
Any final questions? One over there.
Minister, thank you for the conversation, for the speech. I was just wondering, you mentioned it being percent of your income, what you're spending, obviously, or the interest cost on that. Obviously, the interest cost is a function of debt and the interest rate what we're paying. So the question is, what does government/Treasury do to get the margins down?
Well, obviously the costs of our debt are a factor in large part of what's happening internationally, and we can't control that, but they're also a factor of how we are seen in terms of our credit worthiness. And you will probably have observed that this year both Fitch and Moody's said, well, actually, New Zealand, you've been a long time in deficit. You've been a long time with debt increasing. We're going to be watching you very carefully with a view that if you don't show progress on this front, then we will downgrade you. Now, that would be bad, because if our credit rating agency comes down, then all things being equal, you would expect us to start having to pay more for our debt. And so one of the reasons why our government remains focused on getting on top of debt and showing progress is that we know that in the absence of doing that, we will end up having to pay the piper. And the piper is the fact that we borrow significant sums internationally and we can't take affordable rates on that debt for granted. So our focus is demonstrating to the world that we are credible fiscally, that we are getting our books back in balance, that we are making progress, that we will be getting that debt down so that they know that we continue to be a reliable country to lend to.
I think that gives me the opportunity to be a good politician and keep my promise and get everyone out here
Fantastic.
by 8:30. So
Very good.
Thank you, Sharon, for your insights, as always, on things to do with the economy, and to the Minister. Like most households and businesses, but on a very supersized level, you're having to balance the long-term investment needed for New Zealand and the books in the shorter term, and I don't envy you at all. In my trips overseas since the Middle East situation started, the message that keeps being spoken about is resilience. That small country at the bottom of the Pacific, we're miles away from all of our markets, we're very vulnerable to energy, supply chain, geopolitical, geological, weather shocks, and more so than probably many may realise. So getting our books in shape is really critical to being a resilient nation. And to our customers in the room today, especially PICPOC, if you want to talk about more about what we can do to help make your businesses more resilient, please contact us. If you're resilient and successful, so are we, and we appreciate you choosing us as your bank. So have a good day, everyone.